bitches!
I just been stuck watching a ton of stuff preparing for the end of the year video, and then I figured since one of those movies was the new Pinocchio movie, not that one, in due time for that one. No, the one made by the weirdo. Yes, that one. So I figured, hey, let's do a thing. So today, I'll be ranking every Guillermo del Toro movie. I was fairly unfamiliar with most of del Toro's works, besides a few outliers that I've seen previously, but after watching all of his films, even if some of them aren't great, I've become a massive fan for his creative mind and extreme talent behind the camera. I plan to make more videos on directors and their works similar to this when they're releasing a new movie. Like when Oppenheimer is coming out, I'll definitely be doing all of Christopher Nolan's filmography, and so on and so forth. But man, it would be cool to have another person to talk about these movies with. If only there was someone who can dish out tons of facts regarding these movies and this director. Man, it's gonna feel very lonely talking about.
Is someone talking about Guillermo del Toro's movies? Hey there, Patrick. I heard that you were looking for an expert on Guillermo del Toro's movies. Well, I am not that, but I would say I'm a pretty passionate fan of his work. If you need someone to talk to, I'm happy to be a volunteer.
Neat. Anyways, let's get on to the ranking. Fortunately for my first director's ranking, none of these movies are bad in my opinion. Just some are much better than others, but even his weaker films have a lot more merit than some directors' best, so gotta love that.
I believe someone phoned about an animal problem. The solution is standing before you.
I think Mimic is emblematic of both the strengths and weaknesses of Del Toro's earliest works. It has a fun concept that has a hook, but barely has enough to sustain it for 2 hours. It's really well directed, but some of the choices used are really irritating, like the shaky cam and rapid fire editing during the action and suspense. Look no further than the opening credits, which just might be the most obnoxious OC I've ever seen due to the non-stop strobe lighting and quick cut editing. The acting is really solid, but the characters are as bland as tofu. The suspense is pretty effective, but after seeing the monsters so much, it kind of falls flat after a while. But at least the effects are really good, especially the practical ones. Even the CG holds up fine for 1997, which was the same year Batman Dawn of the Dinosaurs came out, so this movie looks like fucking Avatar compared to its competition. Overall, this movie is fine, but if this is Del Toro's lowest and it's only fine, then damn, the consistency is on point, I must say.
Flawless victory.
Also, did you know Thanos and Daryl Dixon were in a Del Toro movie? I didn't know that Thanos and Daryl Dixon were in a Del Toro movie. Crazy!
Yeah, this movie is probably the weakest one here. But a lot of that comes down to the producers on the movie, a certain Harvey and Bob Weinstein. The pair interfered a lot in the production, even demanding things be reshot according to their liking. Del Toro's original idea for the story had a much darker ending, where the insects escape and survive, becoming more and more human-like. But that had to get changed because the producers didn't like it. And you can tell, the way the final product ends in massive explosions, it's just not the man's style. Let's head up the list now.
Pardon me, gentlemen, but have either of you seen a cowboy doll with a bad arm?
Why, no, I haven't.
Hey, he was talking to me!
No, he was talking to me!
Why, you...
Pacific Rim is a movie where there's no rim in the Pacific, and what we got was a cheesy, dumb, enjoyable popcorn flick. I'll admit that I'm not a massive fan of movies that put the fun factor over story and characters. Like, the reason why Jurassic Park works where the sequels don't is that it puts in the extra effort to give characters actual motivation and personalities, as well as having iconic and fun monster scenes. That's part of the reason why I consider it to be one of my favorite monster horror movies ever. Here we have, like, 1 or 2 characters I actually enjoy, that being Idris Elba's character and Ron Perlman, because it's motherfucking Ron Perlman. But otherwise, everyone else is either one-dimensional or just plain wooden. Like, Charlie Hunnam's character is a complete bore and his performance is just as wooden. Mako is better because of her relationship with Elba's character and how she holds her own against others, but damn is she down apocalyptic for Hunnam's character, it hurts. Charlie Day is so damn annoying here, he feels so out of place amongst the rest of the cast and especially the tone.
Oh, no, call me Newt. Only my mother calls me doctor. Herman, these are human beings. Why don't you say hello?
Can you shut the fuck up?
And everyone else is just non-existent to me. But regarding the fight scenes and the fun factor of this film, yeah, this is where most of the effort was put into. Not only does the CG hold up extremely well for an almost 10-year-old movie, but this is where Del Toro had the most fun directing. He does sacrifice his innovative color correction, which is my favorite aspect to his directing, but he does make up for it in how grand he makes every battle look. Most of the action is filmed in wide, low-angled shots so you can feel the power that generates from these machines and creatures. There's some nice tension towards the end, and again, Ron motherfucking Perlman. Yeah, I would be lying if I said I found this to be among one of his most rewatchable features, and I probably won't be watching it again, but hey, it was fun, so it's my loss.
Now, I do agree this is perhaps Del Toro's least thematic movie. There's not really a lot being said here about big ideas, but goddamn, this action is so good! The way the camera is kept nice and smooth, it makes the spectacle feel all the grander. There's a real weight to how the mechas and the kaiju move, feeling like they're shaking the earth with every step. Not to mention I just like the optimism this movie has. This idea of nations coming together to fight this existential threat together, everyone being on the same team. There's a wholesomeness to it that I really appreciate. It's an action blockbuster with a heart, and I really appreciate that.
Today we are canceling the apocalypse!
Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but you're canceled.
This is my sister.
This is my brother.
We are siblings and we care for each other. Everything we own,
we always share.
Because we are siblings and we have the same hair.
Amongst all of Del Toro's features, Crimson Peak seems to be the most divisive. Either people love it or hate it, and for me, I thought it was a decent film with some glaring issues holding it back from being genuinely great. Because honestly, trim about 30 minutes off the runtime and you would have a very tense emotional horror romance with some neat ass twists. But with those 30 minutes, it feels bloated and repetitive. There's only so many times Edith can be waking up from a strange noise, walking around corridors, hearing or seeing a horrifying ghost, and then waking up like it was a bad dream. It was fine the first time, tolerable the second, but then it just kept going. Which is upsetting because I thought it was a really interesting first act and the last was really great, honestly one of Del Toro's best. But the second really brings it down for me. What also brings this movie down is the main character. While Maya What's-Her-Face is really good, her character never undergoes any change or has any real arc throughout. She's merely there to be the audience surrogate, and that would be fine if she was actually interesting at all, but she ain't. But credit where credit is due. The talents both behind and in front of the camera are really great. Tom Hiddleston and Jessica Chastain are great and have good chemistry? They were easily the most intriguing characters in the film, and I really like the story progressions for them. And the visuals, production design, and direction shine through once again. I also feel you could make a strong case for this having connections with another one of Del Toro's movies based on the ghost paradox used in both films. This film could be best described as a snowstorm. A beautiful sight to see, but rough once you delve deep within. Stupid metaphor aside.
She's fine, she's prettier than you.
Maybe as a whole it's just fine, but in terms of the production design and the music, this is perhaps Del Toro's most beautiful film. The first shot of Allerdale Hall combined with the haunting music.
Goodness, how many rooms are there?
I don't know. Would you like to count them?
Mwah, stunning. Steals my breath away. His penchant for the idea of blurring the lines between monsters and humans is probably the most obvious here. And to be sure, it's not a subtle movie, but if you sit back and let it take you for the ride, it's a sweeping tale that is absolutely worth seeing for its somber spectacle.
Hellboy is pretty fun, not gonna lie. Not perfect at all, but there's just this infectious charm from this film that I can't help but vibe with. Ron Perlman is freaking iconic as his character. As much as I love David Harbour, no one can play Hellboy with this much wit, fun, and emotion quite like Ron Perlman. Also, he never risked life and limb for a box full of kittens, so instant win for Ron. The makeup work here overall is fantastic. The colors pop out more in this than even Blade 2. and I really like many of the characters. With that said, some characters are not so fun to watch like HB. There's this boring ass FBI agent and this boring ass firebender, and they create this boring ass love triangle with Hellboy, and it's as painful as I'm making it sound. Honestly, besides being the audience surrogates, I don't see the point in this FBI character. I also wish the whole "we can't let the public see Hellboy or else something bad might happen" plotline wasn't forgotten halfway through. Honestly, it's so underutilized that it feels unnecessary for the rest of the film and just unresolved conflict. Some of the effects still hold up, but some really don't, and I wish Abe was used more here because he was pretty epic. Overall, this was a fun little comic book movie involving Ron Perlman as Hellboy saving a box full of kittens from a hentai creature, and that's pretty neat.
I think fun is a really good way to describe this movie. That said, I agree with a lot of your criticisms here. Having the main character be this FBI guy does feel like an odd choice. Sure, it helps as an audience surrogate, but we don't really need this random normal human guy to be an audience surrogate, and that's even going to be demonstrated by Hellboy 2. I do think this is perhaps the most standardized of Del Toro's films, and while it has some fun moments, I'd personally rank this below Pacific Rim myself.
I'm not dead.
Yeah, he says he's not dead.
Yes, he is. I'm not.
Kronos was Del Toro's debut film, and while certainly not his best, I could definitely say that his direction shined even with his very first film. From his sweeping lateral tracking shots showcasing the characters and environments very well, to the lighting in particular changing subtly as the film continued on, from a warm, inviting orange to a cold, deathly blue, indicating the state of our main character and his situation. The editing has some really smooth transitions, like when we move from one location to the next, and the performances are all pretty good, especially Ron Perlman just being 100% high note chill throughout.
What the fuck is it now, you dried up old prune?
Daddy, chill.
What the hell?
Which does a lot for this film, as I believe the characters and story are what hold it back from being genuinely great. It starts out really intriguing, with the old man seeking the truth to this device that grants the user immortality, and the game of cat and mouse between him and Ron Perlman is genuinely exciting. But as the film goes on, it becomes less interesting as the mystery is revealed more. Also, the characters aren't very compelling. They serve the story fine, but aren't the most unique characters you'll ever find. Like, the little girl in this film is really only a plot device for the old man, which is really just an irritating trope that I'm glad is evolving with things like The Last of Us. There were some audio leveling issues during one scene that was very noticeable, and it does end very predictably, like there really isn't much to surprise you. But overall, for a debut film, this isn't half bad at all, and it already showed the world this man's talents as a director super well. Also, I like Ron Perlman and Eternal Lick as much as I love Chris Evans and Irish Nit.
I think I agree with you on a lot of this. It's not the most memorable of his work, but again, it's his debut feature film, and it really set the stage for what he was going to do. His penchant for unusual designs and stories about human nature being corrupted into something monstrous, it can all be found here. It's really fun to see this title and start to pick out all the elements of his style early on.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
Blade 2 is quite the fun time, if I do say so myself, and I think an improvement on the admittedly very average first film. And these are the types of movies I'm dreading watching going forward with this series. Sequels made by a different director than the original. See, this film was made by Del Toro, while the first film was made by the same guy who made, this.
Leave a run!
Hey, can you throw me another pre-sun?
So that leaves me with two options. Do I just skip the original and go straight to the sequel so I can get the video out faster? Or do I trudge through the original just to get to the sequel? For this film, I watched both the original and the sequel, and after watching Blade 2, it turns out you can honestly just skip the first film and still have a fun time just watching the sequel. This issue will become more apparent when the director at hand directs a movie in a longer running series, but for now, I'll settle with just watching one or two movies to get to their film. Anyways, I really like Blade 2. Del Toro brought his own style to the series that was really lacking from the first, and he's a very novel pick for the series. His colors and lighting adds a lot of atmosphere, even adds significance to many characters. The characters themselves are really fun, especially Blade himself.
You've been training for 2 years to take me out. And now here I am. Ooh, so exciting, isn't it?
This guy killed 3 people, and yet you'll watch it, young lady, and you'll go, I like this guy.
I really love the idea of a group of vampires teaming up with Blade, who they were sent to kill for years, which adds a lot of suspense to the film. The action's really fun, though I could do with a lot less quick-cut editing, especially the ones near the end. The effects hold up surprisingly well for 2002 standards. I even got used to the rubber CG bodies after a while, and I don't know, seeing Wesley Snipes team up with Ron Perlman and Norman Reedus is just everything I needed in life. Overall, besides a few editing choices and some pacing issues, as well as some characters feeling left out to dry when it comes to development, I had a really good time watching this film. It certainly isn't one of the greatest films Del Toro has ever made, but I'd watch it again, for sure. But man, seeing Daryl die in something, it just feels wrong now.
I myself do like the first Blade movie a lot. It's very 90s. When it's good, it's badass. When it's bad, it's hilarious. That said, I think Blade 2 is very much a worthy sequel, even if a strange one. It takes a turn towards outright horror. That's a good thing though, at least to me. It feels very much like a Del Toro movie. Not to mention I really like the vampire designs here. In the first Blade, the vampires are just regular people with fangs trying to look hot. Now this is a vampire. So is this. And also this. And I also like the way that Del Toro humanizes a quote-unquote evil vampire, making him a bit more of a tragic figure. This whole scene right here, this is the director's stamp. Damn good movie.
You obviously do not know who you are fucking with!
Oh my God, he's so goddamn cool!
So, Hades, you finally made it. How are things in the underworld?
Well, they're just fine. You know, a little dark, a little gloomy, and as always, hey, full of dead people. What are you gonna do?
Hellboy 2: The Golden Army is a movie where they mention YouTube within the first 10 minutes. I knew this film was going to be pretty cool.
I suppress each photo. Cell phone videos. They cost me a fortune, and they show up on YouTube.
I think this is Del Toro's best comic book movie, as I think he does a lot more with the characters and the action, and I think it's just a lot more fun. Even the villain's intro is pretty freaking cool. Like, I don't have an excuse for liking this scene this much, it's just cool. But the choreography feels a lot more creative and cool. The effects hold up exceptionally well to this day. Even the cartoonish CG feels in line with who Hellboy is, a fun cartoonish character. I like that we get more time with Abe because he's epic, and whenever he's happy, I can't help but be happy too. Even though his person of interest is as bland as a communion wafer. Yeah, with my issues, I thought they were going to do a lot more things with the villain and make him more interesting with the whole he and his sister's lives are intertwined bit. But it goes in the most predictable route, and he just feels like a standard two-dimensional villain bent on world domination and all that jazz. Also, I can't help but compare his design to Daemon Targaryen. Like, cut your fucking beautiful hair, dude. And the whole outcast subplot goes nowhere once everything is said and done. Like, the world still hates him. Defeating the Golden Army does nothing for your social status because, like, who the fuck cares or knows in this world? But overall, this was a really fun time with the sweet boy from the Upside Down or something like that. Just a little less Jimmy Kimmel and we'll be good.
Doug Jones plays not only Abe Sapien, but also the Chamberlain and the Angel of Death. That's the most Doug Jones characters in a single movie, and that's why this is the best one. Okay, I'm joking. Kinda. But this Hellboy really leans into the strengths of the first movie. Boring FBI agent gets exiled to fucking Antarctica, and now we get to follow the more interesting characters around. This movie has even more crazy, beautiful designs, so many more memorable sequences. To be sure, it is still pretty predictable, especially in a post-superhero glut world, but when this movie is showing us something interesting or having a chummy moment between characters, it's magical. An entire magnitude better than the first movie. And sadly, we will never see how the finale would wrap things up. Send Hellboy 3 to the graveyard, along with Del Toro's Hobbit movies and the Mountains of Madness. What a sad world we live in. Anyways, let's move on to...
Well, I stood up for you, and you lied to me. You liar!
It's called a hustle, sweetheart. And I'm not the liar. He is.
This was my first Guillermo del Toro movie I watched in the theater, and while I wasn't a massive fan at first, upon rewatch, I found a lot more to appreciate about it. The writing and dialogue are some of del Toro's best, subtly leading our main character to a fate worse than death. Like, for example, the main character doesn't speak a word for the first 10 minutes until he comes across the geek, which does a lot for things later down the line for his character. The characters, for the most part, are really well handled. The production design and score are probably my favorite parts about the film, along with del Toro's direction, and one of the best performances in any of his movies with Bradley Cooper. He's just a very good, subtle actor, and his best moment is at the very end, which may just be my favorite ending in any del Toro movie. Normally in a story whose revolving theme is about guilt, we see the main character rise and move past it. But del Toro decides on making a story that says, what if we made a story like that, but see the main character slowly become more twisted and self-centered? And it actually works extremely well for that reason. But yeah, even if I think the pacing is really well done, it's still a very long movie, and I feel like two stitched together into one. I also would have liked more from Rooney Mara's character, because I really like her a lot as an actress, and she really doesn't do much throughout it. But I still really like this movie, and I think it's fairly underrated compared to the rest of del Toro's catalog. Also, I'm just now seeing a trend of movies that just put Willem Dafoe in so that he could just steal the entire show from everyone else. Like this, Grand Budapest and The Northman are made better just from his presence alone. I just love this weird man.
Willem Dafoe being chaotic is always a welcome addition in any movie. As for the rest of Nightmare Alley, I will admit this one is weird to me. It's a very good movie, of course, but at the same time it feels the least like a Guillermo del Toro movie. You still have some incredible moments, of course, like the cemetery charade. This is one of his better movies from a, for lack of a better word, an objective sense, yet it feels like his usual flair, his quirks and mannerisms have been dialed down. I've been meaning to rewatch this movie, so I might feel different after a second viewing, but it does stick out in his filmography for being perhaps too clean.
He fucked a fish!
He did not fuck a fish!
He wanted to fuck a fish!
Oh, predator fish fucker!
I think I can say with absolute confidence that The Shape of Water is del Toro's strangest movie made to date. And that's saying a lot when talking about this director, but it's true. A movie about experimentation and hatred for the other is one thing, but then throw in some fish sex and goddamn, did things just turn completely. And while I think the explicit fish love aspect is really weird and honestly could have just been cut from the entire movie, almost everything else surrounding it is mesmerizing to watch. Well, almost everything. Michael Shannon's character was very cheesy, and many things he says and does felt very different from the tone of the rest of the movie. Also, the pacing can run on a little too long and could have been trimmed by like 5 to 10 minutes. Otherwise, yeah, I really like this movie. This is probably del Toro's most magical movie, with both his visuals and the score from Alexandre Desplat, which is just gorgeous to listen to. More than most of his other films, I feel the most transported to another world here. I bought into the loneliness of Sally Hawkins' character as well as Richard Jenkins, who are just both fantastic. I understood Octavia Spencer's play and she was very enjoyable to watch, and Doug Jones is just captivating as hell as the asset. The makeup and design for him is phenomenal and definitely deserved the Oscar for sure. Oh wait, it wasn't even nominated? What the fuck? Which leads to the big elephant in the room. This film was del Toro's first ever Best Picture nomination and win, along with his first Best Director win. And while I'm happy as hell that he finally won for something knowing how talented he is, I think this was the weirdest one to finally give it to him for. Not saying this movie is bad so it doesn't deserve it, far from it. But this isn't his most ambitious project, nor something that the Academy usually pays attention to, and now they decide to be more varied. But in a year as strong as 2017 for Best Picture nominees, with movies such as Dunkirk, Get Out, and Lady Bird, this seemed rather safe in comparison. I plan on making a 21st Century Best Picture winners ranking video soon, so I'll talk about it more. But while I'm happy he finally won, I would have gone with a different choice for this first win, knowing how ambitious some of his other films are. But regardless, he finally got the recognition he deserved, and that's all I could have asked for. You're doing great, Sweaty. Now let's continue.
Actually, before we continue, I'm going to say a brief thing here. I say brief because as I'm recording this, I'm also editing my own video analyzing The Shape of Water. Coming soon. But a couple of points I make in that script are that this movie actually has an interesting sub-theme about consumerism and how we find happiness in our lives. And there's a couple moments where it weaves into the story, like Richard Jenkins' character Giles interacting with this pie store franchisee, or Eliza's desire for these red shoes, which are then shed at the film's conclusion. And this is where Michael Shannon's Colonel Strickland also weaves into the picture more solidly. He's also facing his own pressure, his own threat. And this crucial moment where we see him lose his cocky aura to try to plead for clemency is one of the most important scenes in the movie. At least to me. This is the first of the big three that we're talking about here today. The 3 movies of his that are 10 out of 10s to me. Thoroughly fantastic. Now, let's continue.
Father, when can I leave to be on my own?
So like, in a year when Pinocchio has pretty much been made a joke, all it took was Guillermo del Toro finally dabbling his hands at animation, let alone stop motion animation, to give the wooden child another chance at life, huh? Yeah, the 3rd latest Pinocchio movie is really damn good. As much as other stop motion movies have impressed the shit out of me, this movie is pretty damn high in regards to how fluid it feels. Even shots like these have so much going on for about 10 seconds of footage. I love Pinocchio's growth, but Geppetto may just have the most emotional arc, and I felt the most for him in this movie. I love Cricket and his arc as well, and after watching Moulin Rouge this year, I can listen to Ewan McGregor singing for days, as I've already been doing. In general, the voice talents are perfect, especially David Bradley as Geppetto, and Christoph Waltz as the big former Italian stereotype in the original film, now turned into an interesting villain. I will say that there's some slow bits in the middle of the film, not bad, just noticeably slower than the rest of the film, and some of the songs were good for the story reasons, but not many of them were that memorable, except the opening and ending songs because again, me likey the Jedi singing. So yeah, I love this movie for multiple reasons, and I'll eventually watch the other 2 Pinocchio movies for this year because I'm confident to say this is probably the best one. Lastly, I will admit that I don't plan on including films made by 2 directors unless they're a shared duo like the Coen brothers, because I like to see what that singular director has accomplished themselves. But I'm making an exception here because I want to support both Del Toro and stop motion animation by telling you to go see this movie now.
The story of Pinocchio has been reimagined here in this 14-year-long passion project. That's right, this movie was announced in 2008, and it's mired through production hell to finally get to our screens. And it was worth every second of the wait. The classic tale is turned on its head, where instead of Pinocchio changing into a real boy by learning to be good and obedient, he instead learns to be good by inspiring disobedience. This is a film with a lot of big ideas, questions about what it means to be a puppet, about the value of loving people as they are instead of demanding they become something they're not. And these ideas are paid off really well. The setting of fascist Italy is no mere window dressing. It forms an integral component of the movie's themes. The characters from the story are given more depth, and the story as a whole is enriched into something both heartfelt and thought-provoking. Wrap it all up in some incredible animation, and you have something truly beautiful.
The Devil's Backbone is a movie where an old man drinks a shot of baby juice, and it's pretty epic. This was one of the films I was most intrigued by when going through Del Toro's filmography, and after watching it, the more I think about it, the more I continue to love it. Unlike his previous film Mimic, where the studio really fucked his vision over and made it into a lesser film as a result, here I can clearly see the passion from Del Toro and a story he really wanted to tell. It's a story that invites thoughts of fear and trust regarding your peers and how nothing is quite as it seems. It's also a great commentary on war and the paranoia that it can cause to many people. There's also ghosts here, and at first I was pretty perplexed by this decision, but I think it's an appropriate trope to use regarding how kids reflect on who they can trust and the mistakes that could happen if the powers that be aren't so careful. The kids themselves are all really good, which is always a plus, especially when the film is pretty much carried by them. The adults are also great, especially the old doctor, who is probably my favorite character. He's just a very caring guy who wants the best for everyone, but learns that he isn't immune to being selfish, which can lead to more people being hurt as a result. At first, I wasn't a massive fan of the villains, since I think when a villain's goal is just money, I'm pretty bored by them, but thinking about what the film is trying to say about people during the time of war, He got better as a result. I just think it could have been a little more complex, but that's just a personal thing. And I also think the music could have been dialed down a bit during the actual horror scenes. Like, I don't necessarily need suspenseful music when the scenes are already pretty tense enough, but that's pretty nitpicky overall. Regardless, the direction and cinematography are all on point as usual, the visuals hold up, the characters are great, and the story is very compelling. Go check it out while I have a shot of some Devil's Backbone, because why not?
Okay, so this is where I'm going to have to really press my points down here. I do have a video on my channel explaining this in a little more detail, but what's important to note first of all is that this is my favorite movie of all time, because everything about it is simply flawless. The character of Jaime has one of my favorite redemption arcs I've ever seen. The visual direction is raw and powerful, and it's an exemplar of how Del Toro uses violence. He doesn't revel in it like a sadist, but at the same time he doesn't shy away from it. And it's used to underscore how brutal and tragic the situation is. And then its allegories. If you're not familiar with the Spanish Civil War, the setting of this film, the country was torn to pieces in a conflict where fascist nationalist forces performed a failed coup d'etat against the liberal leftist Republican government in 1936. 3 years later, the nationalist forces won, and Francisco Franco's regime ruled Spain until the 70s. In that time frame, children were forcibly seized from families regarded as undesirable and adopted to either regime supporters or out of the country entirely. That is what this ghost represents. The ghost of a boy whose life was stolen by avarice and cruelty. And he haunts the orphanage the same way this real-world tragedy continues to haunt Spanish politics today. Anyways, 10 out of 10 movie. Let's move on.
Someone's head will roll for this.
What else can be said about one of the greatest fantasy and horror movies ever made? Pan's Labyrinth is one of the most remarkable pieces of art I've ever seen. It's emblematic of everything that made Del Toro one of the most gifted visionaries of the modern day. From the beautiful cinematography to the breathtaking visuals to the amazing characters and the truly engrossing story. Mixing these two types of genres together may seem like an odd choice. I mean, how do you make a movie that includes the Franco regime and a faun? But since the main character is a child, we get the opportunity to view the terrors of war with the fantastical mindset of a child, trying to make sense of an increasingly maddening world. The film ultimately asks, is it right to escape reality for maybe just a moment in time just to feel some semblance of hope? The movie doesn't give you a clear-cut answer, and we're just left to ponder what our main character learned from all this. I don't know, man, there's no words that can truly do this movie justice. As usual with Del Toro, his direction is extremely calculated and beautiful, and this may just be his most aesthetically gorgeous movie to date. The effects still look incredible 16 years later, with the faun looking as iconic as ever and the pale man making my eyes want to commit die because of how terrifying he is. The performances from everyone in the cast are fantastic, as well as having one of the best child performances I've ever seen. The ending has so much tension throughout, and the ending has some truly haunting scenes. The colors are even more vibrant in this than most of his other movies, which is saying a lot, and the story had me engaged from its intriguing beginning to its bittersweet ending. What else can be said about Del Toro's masterpiece? It's one of my all-time favorite movies, and one that surely cannot be duplicated.
Yeah, ditto. The movie is a masterpiece at every level of filmmaking. To call it heart-wrenching and powerful would be an understatement. It's stunning in a way precious few films are. The way it characterizes Captain Vidal is so elegant and so clear. The way it shows Ophelia's quest to prove herself worthy as a princess is so beautiful. And that's the thing. I'm in the camp that believes all the fantasy stuff is real. And in this context, the movie has a powerful theme about the virtue of disobedience, which aligns well with the non-fantasy elements.
Es que obedecer por obedecer, así sin pensarlo. Eso solo lo hacen gentes como usted, capitán.
Like I said before, I do still prefer Devil's Backbone, but it's very, very close. This is Del Toro's most iconic film for a good reason, and I'm very happy to see it at the top of this list.
Wow, this was a really fun, long as hell journey with just the biggest weirdo in all of Hollywood. Thank you, Daniel, and I'm gonna take a nap now. Bye!
Wait, my channel plug!